Okay, Tatters, let's get started. My name is Kaye, and I teach the design class for the online tatting classes. And I have a little show and tell from last time. Let me switch over to the other camera here. And remember, last time we were looking at insects. And not that we were going to tat insects, but we were looking at them in depth to find interesting areas which might lead themselves to be a tatting project. And so since this is the year of the cicada, I picked out a cicada picture. And specifically, I was looking at this area kind of like on the back of his neck. And what drew me to this was it looked like we could do a ring here, a ring here, and a ring here, and a ring here, and then it had this kind of an M shape here in the middle. And so I tatted it up in 20. It was a little small, so I retatted it again in 10. And so here's the design. Let me focus here on one repeat. Was the 2 rings on either side with kind of that M shape in the middle. And I put an extra ring up at the top and then a little Josephine ring down at the bottom. And repeating that, I ended up with kind of a nice little edging design here. I had to add a chain in between the repeats, but it's definitely got some nice possibilities there. So I was running out of thread over here on the edge, so I'll have to load up my shuttles again and give it a go, maybe in some size 20. But I was pleased with the way that turned out. As I was looking through my books, I was looking for one of my color books, and I didn't find it really. So I forgot that I had what we call in embroidery is called a pick file, P-I-C-K. And that's where we would put ideas for, like, here would be a rose. I've got an idea for a tatted rose type thing. So I may have to come back to that picture for some inspiration. But anytime we come across a pattern or a picture that looks interesting that might lead to something else, whether it would be in embroidery or in tatting, I pulled it out, put it in my pick file. And actually, as I was thumbing through this afternoon before class, I came across these pictures, which I actually did turn into tatting designs. Here's a little strawberries that led to the strawberry basket that's in the book Tatting Treasures, or Treasures in Tatting. And then here's the little strawberry bloom that is I believe it's in More of This and Tat. So I've actually used some of these designs to lead to tatting designs. So that's, another option. And, the way we used our insects was to use our L brackets and kind of focus in on one area. You could do that with most any picture, practically. Just get your L brackets out and see where they lead you. And it could be inspiration for a whole another idea. So today we're going to talk about the principles of dominance and variety. A lot of it overlaps with the proportion that I lectured on last week. I almost lumped them both together, but felt it was a bit too much information for one week. But in design, dominance is needed to achieve interest. Without dominance, everything in the piece has equal importance, and there is nothing to draw or lead the eye of the viewer. So an artist uses contrasts of shape, value, or size to draw attention to the most important part of the work. So as a designer, you also need to use subordination or something to contrast with the main part of your design. So in our insect exercises from last time, you may have had to go back to the original drawing of your insect where you circled different areas of interest or just kind of looked around on the insect itself for another object to give separation between your main focus area. With mine, let me switch back here. With mine, once I got it tatted up and repeating, I had this nice area of a lot of rings, and then it was contrast already with a nice separation. So I have some good repetition and rhythm going in this piece. So I didn't really need to add two, but it could have been that you needed to add another little bit in between each of the repeats. So if that was what you came up with, you were working with dominance and subordination without even knowing it. So artists usually rely on a focal point to create a pleasing design. If you are looking at a tatted piece, ask yourself, is my eye being drawn to a certain spot? That spot is more than likely the focal point. Focal points can usually be placed at or near the center of the piece. They can be emphasized by a change in value, like a dark area surrounded by a light area, or a light area surrounded by a darker area. Sometimes the focal points are made larger in size than their supporting areas. And if you place a focal point too near the edge, it can sometimes pull the viewer's eye right off the edge of the design and send them on to the next piece. And during one of my design classes, I came up with kind of a circular design with an arrow that pointed on, go to the next piece. And so that would not be a very successful design because we want the viewer to stay looking at our piece for a longer period. So, keep in mind, you want to keep your focal points towards the middle of your piece. If your eye is not drawn to a certain place, then you're probably looking at pattern. Pattern does not have a focal point. It is used extensively in art to decorate vases, for fabric decorations. It could be setting up an area for a focal point. So pattern is not in itself a bad thing. You don't have to have a focal point in your design for your design to be unified. If it's pattern, it's unified already. So basically when designing, ask yourself, is my pattern pleasing? And that's the main point of what you want to be designing. So to add interest to a design, we look to the principle of variety, which is contrast and elaboration. Contrast can be made by using a color scheme in your design. Another option could be, you could be setting up a contrast of warm colors versus cool colors. But be careful when choosing your colors. Keep in mind you most importantly want a contrast of value, how light or dark your colors are. You don't want your piece to be a middle value mush where you've chosen all these wonderful colors, but they're all about the same value, and you can't really, there's no emphasis there. You may also use a contrast of thread sizes for interest to show scale and proportion, and to emphasize dominance or your focal point. Elaboration in tatting means basically how many tricks you want to show in your piece. A successful piece will use 1 to 3 extra techniques. For example, some of these extras could be a Josephine ring, SCMRs, Victorian sets or node stitch for examples, in addition to your regular rings and chains. Repeating an extra technique throughout the design with the rings and chains will make a more unified piece. You don't want to put everything you've learned into one piece. It just would be way too busy. You also do not want to use more than one variegated color in your piece. You may support that variegated color with a multiple of solids, but more than one variegated color will sacrifice the detail of your design. So today's activity is I'm going to show you how to make a golden rectangle and a golden spiral, which has nothing to do with dominance and variety, but it does have everything to do with the focal point. The golden rectangle dates from ancient Greece. They used it to influence their architecture, art, and popular culture. The proportions were considered visually appealing and pleasing to the mind. Artists used the golden rectangle to help them locate the best area to place a focal point and where to distribute the weight of their design. And then the golden spiral, which is derived from the golden rectangle, is found throughout nature, in nautilus shells, to fern fronds, to the way seeds are arranged in sunflowers. And so today, your homework is how to draw one of these golden rectangles. And the main point of the main characteristic of a golden rectangle has to do with the relationship between the length and the width of the rectangle itself. It comes out to a ratio of 1.1618, something like that. It's kind of like pi, where the numbers keep going and there's no repeat. So just this one's shown as the Greek letter phi. But I'll show you an interesting thing about these. So to start with your golden rectangle, we're going to draw a square 5 inches on each side, or it's like 12.7 centimeters. I've got the centimeter value in the homework. And you want to put your square over here on the left side, and then extend the bottom line to the other side of your paper. You want to divide the square in half. And so if I start my 1 inch here, 1, 2, 3, 4, here's 5 inches. Half of that would be 2.5, 1, 2.5. So I put a pencil mark here towards the center of the square. And then you'll want a compass, and you'll put your compass there on that halfway point of the square. And the end of your compass is going to reach up here to the corner of your square. And then lightly draw an arc down to the bottom line. And where that intersects is where we want to place the other side of our rectangle. So I found where that arc intersects. Move this up so I can figure out my 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there's that part. And then I'll connect the top . The top. So here we have, and the arm of my camera is not long enough, but from where I started the 5 over here to this line here, and then back up to the top, this is our golden rectangle. It's got that special relationship between the width and the length of the golden ratio of 1.16. We can divide it up into a square and a rectangle. This rectangle is also a golden rectangle. Its width and length have that same ratio. So if we divide this piece up, I'm going to put the point of my compass down here at the bottom of my square and measure up over here to the outside edge of my large golden rectangle and mark, and then move the point over and mark. And I can divide this up into a square. And another golden rectangle. The relationship between its width and its length is the same ratio as the 1.161 of the very large rectangle. And so we keep dividing. Keep dividing this up into squares and smaller golden rectangles. We have a square and another golden rectangle until they keep getting smaller and smaller. As we divide this down, we're getting closer and closer. Another square, another golden rectangle. But we're also approaching the ideal focal point for the large rectangle that we started with. Now you may think, well, why are we studying rectangles? We make circular doilies. Well, a lot of people have been making squares. And about the last time we were making tatted rectangles was when we were making placemats and table runners, and I think we're about due for another repeat of rectangles. So we have, again, another square, another golden rectangle, and so it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. So to construct the golden spiral from this, on this very large piece, I measure from the corner of the original square to that corner. And I'm going to draw an arc. And then on this one, I'll measure from this corner to the edge of the smaller square, and I'll draw another arc. And then on the smaller square, measure from the corner to the edge, and we'll draw another arc. And again, from the smaller, or from on the even smaller square, we measure from the corner to the edge. And then from this one. So our curve keeps getting smaller and smaller. And then at the center, that's somewhere down in here, is where the ideal focal point is. for this golden rectangle. But anywhere on this curve is where we could put a focus. The ideal would be to put a very large focus here in the center, and then we can kind of follow this curve around with subordinating pieces. This is the same shape as the nautilus. And if you've got ferns growing in your garden, they come up kind of in a curve before they flatten out. So your homework is to actually draw a golden rectangle, and you could do a golden curve to go with it. And I will be talking more about other rectangles next time. There's a couple other rules that make designing with rectangles a little easier. So, Harala, are there any questions? Thank you, Nanetta. Yes, ladies, remember to click your like button. So no questions? Yes, and you can watch this later on. It'll be on again later, and you can take your notes from there. Yeah, the bibliography was put in the balance homework. Excellent. Well, ladies, that's all I have for you today. So if everyone's mind is relieved and there's no questions. Thank you, Teresa. Happy tatting to you. And happy tatting to all of you ladies. And gentlemen. I keep forgetting we've got a couple of men. Thank you, Laurel. See you next week. Bye, Bev. And thank you, Harala, for being my mentor. My question person, so happy tatting, Sin.